buffering. There we go. We are live, everyone. So my name is Jesse. I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, and we do have a few groups joining us for the first time today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Of course, there are no classrooms right now. Everyone's stuck at home, so we so appreciate all of you joining us over the last few months. We've hosted 300 events since COVID took kids out of school. So pretty much every scientist, explorer, amazing organization you can think of, we've covered it on this program, and we're so thrilled you've been joining us as we continue the adventure. We just wrapped up a cool session with Greg Mitchell talking about monarchs, and we're going to change tack a little bit now. We are joined live in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. So nice to have a live session all the way from Brazil by Hernani Oliveira. So he is going to talk today about one of his coolest adventures. So he's been all over the world. He's been to Africa, South and Central America, Oceania, to different environments, islands, mountains, savannas, rainforests, dry forests, all over the world, to all these amazing places to understand the human and natural induced changes on species diversity in the tropics. Today, he is going to talk about the flying foxes, so giant bats, really cool animals in the South Pacific. I'm super excited about this. I hope you guys are as keen as I am. And without further ado, thank you so much for joining us today, Hernani. Let's just demute your mic and we'll dive in with this presentation and get the party started. Go for it, man.
Thank you for the introduction again, Jess. It's a pleasure to be here and Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants again, and especially in the International Environmental Day. And it's a pleasure to be presenting again a little bit of my work, and especially in this amazing place in this island in the Pacific. So my name is Hernani Oliveira again, and I'll be talking with you about the Mariana fruit bats and the Mariana Islands, which is an archipelago in the South Pacific, close to Japan and the Philippines. And these bats, they only happen there, and they're incredibly threatened and also endemic, as they only happen there. Let me just start sharing my screen. Just once. Oops. Hello?
Hi, you're still there. You're all good.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. I have a quick technical problem here. Okay.
Okay. Take your time. All good. Perfect.
Okay. Can you see the screen now?
Looks great. Go for it.
Okay. Okay. So just 1 second again. Okay.
If there were no tech problems, it would be boring. It's half the fun.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm working as a postdoctoral researcher in the Mariana Islands. So I basically went to this island in the Pacific, and I lived there for 4 months, just to give a bit of context of what I was doing and how I ended up there. I got a job to work there for 4 months, studying these endemic and threatened species of these islands. What's an endemic species? It's a species that only happens on a specific place. So this makes them very important, because usually they're very sensitive to any perturbations or anything that happens there can basically extirpate them from the environment, and we can lose these species usually kind of easy, especially with species that they happen only in very short, very small spaces and very small geographic ranges. So they only happen in few islands or in few countries or in small spaces. They usually very sensitive to extinction. They can get extinct very easily. So first, to give a bit of an introduction, the Pacific Ocean is the largest portion covers one of the largest portions of land and sea, like on Earth. It's basically 1/3 of the whole Earth is just the Pacific Ocean. It was called Pacific Ocean because after one of the discoverers was sailing there, after going through the South Cape, the waters suddenly became very Pacific, and then that's where the name came from. So we call it Pacific Oceans, and everything that happens, all the islands in the Pacific Ocean are called Pacific Islands as well. And there are many people living on these islands. There are roughly 25,000 islands on the Pacific Ocean. So basically there's a lot of places full of biodiversity and full of people as well. And one of the cool things of these islands is that usually many of the animals that they happen on these islands, sometimes they only happen there. So they are endemics of these islands, which makes them very important for conservation, because if anything happens with these species on these islands, they're lost everywhere. There are basically no, they're not left anywhere else in the world. The Pacific Ocean, the Pacific Islands are divided in these three groups of islands. So you basically have Melanesia, which is a group of islands that people are known to be more darkish skin. You have the Micronesia, which is the group of islands that I was researching, including the Mariana Islands. And you have Polynesia, which is including Hawaii and many other islands. In poly comes from many islands. So there are many islands that happen there. One thing that's interesting is that many of the biodiversity of these islands, so many of the species that happen in these islands, or some of the species, they have a close relationship with humans, at least on the introduction there. So some species, they were not always on these islands. They were actually brought by humans when they came into these places. So humans, they played a big importance in terms of the ecology and the conservation of these islands. It's interesting to know as well that not all animals that we bring to these islands, they are beneficial to these places, or at least they're not, they can bring a lot of problems for the conservation of the species that naturally occurred on these places. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about them and some of the threats of the Mariana fruit bats as well on these islands. So the Mariana Islands is a small archipelago composed of 15 islands on the South Pacific, close to Japan. So you can see here, and the Philippines. So you can see here that follows a big stretch of volcanic activity that's filled with many different islands. But the archipelago is mainly located here, and it's formed by these islands. Only the ones on the south are actually inhabited by humans. So the 4 southern islands are actually inhabited by humans, with all the other ones, with just 1 or 2 with few human settlements, but they're basically uninhabited islands. One of the difference between them is also that the ones on the north are actually coming from volcanic activities. So they were built by volcanoes that started erupting and then forming rocks on top of rocks, on top of rocks, on top of rocks, until it reached the top of the sea and then started becoming an island. And this is already quite interesting. Some of them are still actually active volcanoes, so you can still have potentially some kind of eruption or activity, even though they haven't happened very often in the recent times. But as I said, only the 4 southern islands are actually inhabited by humans, and I was studying the second most southern one, which is called Rota Island. So this is the island of Rota in the Pacific. It's a small island. They have basically 4,000 people, more or less, a little bit less. It's decreasing the amount of people that is living there. It's not a big island. It's just 20 kilometers in length and just around 6 kilometers in width. There are mainly 2 villages in the island. So basically, the Song Song village here and the Sinapalo here. There's some small people spread across the island as well, but these are the main ones. And basically, the rest of the island is just roads or forest or secondary forest, which a little bit already changed. It's not the primary forest, the picture that we have in the books that show all this pristine, this beautiful environments. Sometimes they have already been changed a little bit, but there's still some forests left that are on good conditions on the island. These islands and this island specific, it's one of the main places where the Mariana fruit bats, they actually occur. So when you go, you cannot find Mariana fruit bats anywhere else in the world apart from these islands, and mainly on this one. Rota Islands is one of the islands that holds the highest population of Mariana fruit bats in the Mariana Island archipelago. And one of the curiosities is actually that these islands, they take the name of Mariannus because of a queen that was the wife of one of the colonizer or one of the kings that colonized these islands. But also it's very close to the deepest place on Earth of the ocean floor. So the Mariana Trench actually is very close to the Mariana Islands. So sometimes people report many different strange creatures coming out of the deepness and just on the shallow waters of some of the islands. Which is an interesting, I didn't see any when I was there, but sometimes it happens, which is kind of interesting when you think that they're close to these islands. They're 11,000 meters deep in the water, in the ocean. One thing that's interesting in these islands as well is that there's a lot of typhoons hitting the island. So basically the Pacific is very, on the east side of these islands, very hot. So in certain times of the year, especially on the end of the year, the currents of air, they basically catch the heat from the water and then they start spinning. And then this creates a lot of typhoons and they move from the east to the west. So as the islands are basically south-north or north-south, the typhoons hit many times, or it's very common that the typhoons form and they hit one of these islands because they go from east to west and the islands are north to south. They can change also a little bit of the directions in terms of the north-south movement of them, so they can hit different islands while they move across from the east to the west. And this is very important for the ecology of these islands because they hit the islands and they change the environment, they take down trees, sometimes they kill a lot of species, and this is also a threat for some of the species that happens on these islands. I'm going to show very quickly one of the typhoons that I saw when I was there, just for you to quickly have an idea about how this can affect the islands.
We hear it, Hernani, but we don't see it on our screens.
Oh, okay. That's
odd.
that's strange. Like, yeah, I think I know what's happening.
It's so powerful that it's reaching through the space-time continuum to muck with your presentation. Don't mess with typhoons.
Nope. And try not to be there. No, just kidding. Let me just.
Worst case, if it doesn't play, you can send it to me later and I can share it with our live groups. That's worst case scenario, okay?
Okay, let me just, I think I know exactly what happened. Can you see it now?
I see your whole computer. Oh, there we go. Super Typhoon Hajibis in Rota.
Okay. Okay, so this is from the house that I was living when I was in Rota.
Yeah,
You can see the trees shaking, all the rainfall. But this was not, didn't hit very strongly the island that I was living. It actually hit strongly one of the closer islands, and Japan as well. After it passed through Marianas, it went to Japan, and then it hit very strongly Japan. There's also, but the island is incredibly beautiful. You can see here, this is the village that I was living in during this time. So you can see that you have ocean on one side, ocean on the other side. It's really beautiful. There's a lot of interesting species living there as well. A nice place to stay. And the Mariana fruit bats, of course. And if you want to know if Mariana fruit bats or Mariana crows is one of your main species to see, you definitely need to go to Rota or one of these islands to see them. Otherwise, it will be missing in your list. I was living exactly on this house here, on the center of the screen now. And the Mariana fruit bats were mainly living on these small hills, like here on the top of the screen. Just going to show a little bit of how the island looks like.
Nice. I like the epic music.
Huh?
I like the epic music for it.
Yep, makes everything more interesting. So you can see here a little bit of the forest already. Like, so most of the forest, this island is we call it a limestone. Limestone, it's formed on limestone. So these kind of rocks here. So there's very few soil on the island as well. So you can see here that the trees, they mainly grow on top of rocks or on top of very shallow soil. And these trees also get hit by the typhoons every time. So across the island, you don't see a lot of main, very big trees. They usually don't reach more than 15 meters high because of the soil and the typhoons, all the rain and the wind hitting the island all the time. So this makes also a very interesting combination in terms of the ecology of the island and also of the animals living in this island, all the plant species, the vegetation of the island as well. And just come back to the presentation. Okay, so the typhoons, just for you to have an idea, this is the typhoon that happened when I was in Rota. So you can see Rota is all this island with 20 kilometers wide and 6 kilometers, 20 kilometers in length, and 6 kilometers wide is this small dot here. And this is the typhoon that happened that crossed the islands. The typhoon Hagibis was the fastest accelerating typhoon on history. It went from tropical storm to a super typhoon, which have very strong winds, more than 200 kilometers per hour in just one day. It was very quick and very intense. They don't happen all year. Like they usually happen specific times of the year. In the rest, you usually don't catch any typhoons. But I went in the time that there was typhoon season. So we needed to keep in touch with the alarms all the time and keep the forecast of the weather all checked every day. This is also a picture of how the forests look like. So you have all these trees growing on top of the rocks. Close to the beach, you don't have so many trees. And I also have a video here to show how this forest looks like as well. So you can see a lot of rocks, some small plants sometimes growing on top of other plants. And this we call it limestone karst forest because it grows on top of these kind of rocks. You have also a lot of introduced species on these islands. As I said, like many times the humans come, they bring some species into the islands, which make a lot of threats to the species that already happen on these islands. So some time ago, we believe that the Philippines, they brought the Philippine deer to the islands, mainly to hunt. So now we have deer that in some of these islands that I basically use it for hunting, for the population. There's a lot of hunting in the islands. We have the drongos, which is this black bird here, that they brought initially thinking about decreasing the number of insects in these islands. You have some other different ones like rats, frogs, toads, some monitor lizards as well. The rhinoceros beetles, which is a very big threat because they damage and they kill all the coconut trees, which is an important income for some of these islands, and some lizards as well. And one of the interesting things from these islands is also that they have the brown tree snake, which is considered by some people some of the most damaging invasive species on the planet in history, because it was brought on the 50s to one of these islands, and it basically ate all the birds of the island, all the species of birds in the island, or most of the species of birds in the island are basically gone after this one species of snake was introduced into one. So it actually started spreading in the island. Nobody knew exactly what was happening in the beginning. They thought it was some kind of pesticide that was killing the birds. But then after some years of studying, they discovered that this snake species was eating all the birds in the island. And now we have actually almost no birds in the island, very few species and very small number of individuals in Guam, at least, actually the biggest island, basically because of this invasive species. So you can have an idea about how this bringing species to new environments can be so dangerous and so threatening to the species that are already there. They have reached a peak of 1 million, 2 million individuals of this snake in the biggest islands, just for you to have an idea about how many of these snakes are around the island. You can basically find them anywhere. Sometimes you find them inside the classrooms. Even the classrooms, they can go inside sometimes, that they happen to be there, and they're very invasive and very threatening to all the especially the bird life in the islands. And it's very hard to take them out, to wipe them out again, because there are many complications to take them out of the environments now. Many of these islands, they actually hunt as well. The Mariana fruit bats was one of the species that was was hunted by of the inhabitants of the Marianas. Now it's declining, and the hunting pressure on them is declining, so they're not hunting so much then. Also, the Mariana fruit bats can cause a disease that can kill people who eat them, so nobody should eat them, because also they're a threatened species. But it's a common practice on these islands that they hunt. This is a coconut they use to hunt coconut crabs, which is the largest land arthropod in the world. They can reach more than 3 kilos. It's very, very big and reach very big size as well. Now they're not so big because they have been hunting so much all around the world that the size of the coconut crabs are actually decreasing with time. And also one of the strategies they use as well is to burn. Sometimes they burn piece of the island to hunt. They wait for the things to come out of the forest, and they hunt this piece when they come out of the forest. So this just to give a brief about the ecology of the islands, and just for you to understand a little bit more about where these species of flying fox or where the Mariana fruit bats actually happen. So you can understand a little bit more when I talk about them, where they happen, how things are there, and then you can have a picture of how they are and how they fit in this environment. So just for you to have a bit of an introduction about Mariana fruit bats. Mariana fruit bats are part of a group of bats that we call it flying foxes. So why we call it flying foxes? Because basically most of the species on this group, they look like foxes. If you look at the face of them, they have this big nostril. They have large eyes, which are not so common for bats. And they actually even hunt or they eat during the day. So when you go to even though foxes have night activity, but they look pretty much like foxes, but they fly, the bats, and we call them flying foxes. We have basically 65 types of flying foxes all around the world. Most of them are endemic to islands, so most of them only happen in some islands in the world, and some species are more widespread. They happen in many different places. You can see here in black all the distribution of the flying foxes. So Mariana fruit bat is a species of flying fox, and these 65 species, they happen across all these range. So Africa, South Asia, and Oceania as well. One interesting thing about them is also that they roost colonially. So it's common that you find roosts of them in trees, and in these trees you find many individuals. You can see them shaking like the wings to try to cool down a little bit from the hot. It's very common in Australia because it's a threat. The extreme hot is a big threat for them. You can find them mating as well, finding the boyfriends and girlfriends for each of the partners. And they can be, I find them incredibly cute. I hope you find them as well. One important thing that we have today is that there's a big miscomprehension about the bats because of COVID-19, because bats can host a lot of potential diseases for humans, but when you actually compare the number of viruses that bats have in comparison to other mammal species and other mammal groups, such as carnivores, primates, bats actually don't have more virus than each of these groups when you take into consideration the number of species of bats. So we have much more bats than we have from primates and most of the other groups, apart from rodents. So if you have more species, it's common to imagine that you have more things that they get infected and they can host diseases, but they don't have, as with species as a group, more disease than other groups of mammals when you consider that we have a lot of bats and we have many more bats than other groups of mammals. And they're very threatened as well. Many people kill bats because they find them ugly, or because they are scared, or because even they hunt for eating the bats. In most of a lot of flying fox species, they're actually eaten by the local communities where they happen. Actually, one of the islands from the Mariana archipelago, one species of flying fox was eaten until they were extinguished from the place, or extirpated from the place. So we are damaging them much more than they actually damage us. They can pollinate flowers, they can disperse seeds, they bring a lot of benefits to us. They're actually one of the main forest gardeners that we have around the world. And very importantly, they can also travel big distance as well. So they can bring one seed from one place, and they can travel with this seed to a very large distance and drop this seed, which can help to regrow the forest that we have. So we can have clean water, you can have clean air, and you can have many, many different benefits that we have from the bats. So they benefit us much more than actually damage us. And this disease, they don't get transmitted so easily from them to us. One of the threats that bats have as well is the extreme heat, which climate change is happening, the world is becoming hot in many places, and they don't cope very well with extreme hot. So they die when these hot waves come, especially in Australia. It's very common that we have hot waves. Everything becomes very hot, and basically they keep falling on the ground because they don't have, they cannot cope with such extreme hot. They can only shake the wings to cool down a little bit, but this is sometimes not enough. This is the Mariana fruit bat. It's a middle-sized range species, and for the flying fox, it's not so big. The biggest flying fox that we have can reach 1.5 kilo, which is the biggest bat that we have as well, and a wingspan. So when it stretches the wings, almost 2 meters from the tip of the wing to the other tip, so they can be very, very big. So now you can imagine why they're actually hunted to eat. In the Americas, you don't have very big bats. Usually you have the biggest bats 100 grams, and this is very small when you think about something that's 600 grams or can reach 600 grams as the Mariana fruit bats, and even 1.5 kilos, such as the one of the biggest flying fox that we have in the world. You can see here the size of the wings as well of the bats. This is me. We worked in captivity, so I basically had some cages that we were feeding them in the wild, and then trying to see what they were eating in this land, in this island. I can have I'm going to show a quick video about them eating here as well, so you can see how they actually act. And there's something very interesting about the behavior here, because flying foxes, they don't, many times they don't swallow the pulp of the fruits. So you can see here that actually it's eating the fruit and then spits out the pulp or the fibers of the fruit, and actually just feeds on the juice because it has a higher content of sugar and everything that he needs to eat. So it's a very particular behavior of the flying foxes in comparison to other types of bats that eat fruits as well. And you can see that loves melon as well. So honeydew is it loves honeydews. That's what you used to feed them in the captivity, in the cage, when we were hosting them. You can see here also that they fly very large distance in the islands that they live. So here is Australia. You can see that from south to north, you have roughly 1,000 kilometers, and some individuals can cover more than 500 or even 100 kilometers in one day. So they fly very large distance, and they can carry these seeds, some seeds in their stomach, for more than 1 hour or 3 hours. So they can disperse these seeds very far, and they can build forests in a very large range of space. So they're very important for us because we're cutting our forests. So these species, because they fly so much and they eat a lot of fruits as well and pollinate flowers, they're one of the most important gardeners that we have, not only in Oceania, in the Mariana Islands, but also in Africa and other places as well. One curiosity about the flying foxes as well is that, or the group of that the flying fox belong to, is that the largest migration, mammal migration in the world is actually from one of the group of the flying foxes, that they move across Africa in search of the fruits that they eat. So they're very important for seed dispersal as well. They eat more than 100 species of fruits, which they fly and they poop. They usually, what they do is that they sit on the tree, they keep eating, and then they fly to other places as well. It's very common that many individuals come to the same tree and they spend a lot of time in this tree as a group feeding there. They can feed also during the day, which is not common for bats. For other types of bats, usually most of the bats they go out in the night just to avoid competition with birds. But these types of bats, they have evolved they have developed abilities to feed during the day, and you can see them sometimes even like 2 o'clock in the afternoon eating fruits on a tree, sitting, and they love breadfruit. I don't know if you know what's a breadfruit, but it's a big fruit, and they sit on the top of the fruit and they just keep chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing. These are just some of the pictures of the island as well. You have people fishing a lot of times with octopus, a lot of different types of fishes as well. Spiders, some of them are invasive as well. This is me, like with the village that I was living on the back. The sunsets on the islands are amazing as well. If you want to one day go to visit Hawaii or any of the Pacific islands, I highly recommend. Actually, the Mariana Archipelago are part of the US. So people who are born in these islands are actually American citizens. It's the most distant territory of the US outside the mainland. Some of the forests that they happen there, we used to make observations of them on this hill here. And the water is also incredible in the island. Some of the links that you can see, interesting information about the Mariana fruit bats as well. And that's it. Do you have any questions, any curiosities?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Hernani. Yeah, if you want to come out of screen share, people can check out those YouTube links after the fact too. They'll be able to see that on the YouTube page. This was awesome. So for everyone tuning in on YouTube, you can just let me know where you're joining from, share questions, and I'll pass along as many as I can. But I'm going to start with Stacy and Owen joining us in Ashburn, Virginia. So we're going to come to them first, and then Miss Gualtieri students, just let me know in the chat bar if you have a question. Just type "I have a question." I'll come to as many of you as I can over the next few minutes. But let's go to Stacy and Owen. Kick us off with a cool question, guys.
Do the brown tree snakes eat the bats while they are roosting?
That's a very good question. So what we believe, because the brown tree snake is not a very big snake, and the Mariana fruit bats are very big, so we don't believe that they eat the bats, but we believe that they can eat the juveniles of the bats. So we believe that they can eat the small ones before they grow to be an adult, and this can be a big problem in Guam, which is the island that the brown tree snake happens, because it stops or it doesn't let the population of the island recover. Because there are only a few individuals of Mariana fruit bats on this island, around 50 we believe now, and because we believe that the snakes might be eating the juveniles, so basically the baby ones or the teenagers of the bats, it doesn't let the population start growing again. So they can potentially eat the smaller ones. The adults are too big, if we think, for them to eat, but actually we're not so sure, because this species of snake is very has some abilities that are not, we didn't expect them to be so potentially damaged to the environment. So I think might be potentially, they might be able to, but we believe that they can't. That's it.
Okay, perfect, guys. Do look up the brown tree snake in general. It's a really weird story. It's one of the most interesting invasive species stories in the world. So I encourage you to check that out later. And thank you for not. Ms. Gualtieri, I'm going to come to you directly because you had a cool question typed in the chat bar. And for any of your students, again, just let me know in the chat bar if they have one. But Ms. Gualtieri, if you want to come up with that question, go for it.
I was just wondering if, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Do these bats live in trees or in in caves? And also, are they active during the day or just at nighttime?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So many bat species, they roost in caves, and in some flying foxes, they also roost in caves. But this species in particular, the Mariana fruit bats, we haven't found them roosting in caves still. But what they mainly do is that they have trees that they basically hang upside down, and in many individuals in the same tree or in trees close by. And even though most of the activity of the Mariana fruit bats is still at night, it's not uncommon that you can go like sometimes 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can already see some individuals flying, and even sometimes even then feeding on the fruits and searching for food, which is very, for us that don't live in Africa or Asia or Oceania, it's very uncommon because the bats outside this place, they only come out at night. At most, they come out in the end of the afternoon. So in the end, sometimes 5:30, you can see some bats outside this range of the flying foxes coming out, but flying fox, they can come out to feed very, very early. And this is also related if they don't echolocate, or most of the species don't echolocate. I didn't say this, but bats, usually what they do is that they emit ultrasound. So it's a sound that's very high pitch, and you cannot listen to them. And they use this to understand the environment around them. So most bats, how do they see at night? They go at night and they start emitting these clicks. And then when they come back, then you can understand what's everything that's around, the distance, the shapes. But these bats, the flying fox, they don't actually, most of them, they don't actually echolocate. They just based on the vision. So that's why you see that they have very large eyes compared to the other species of bats. And actually the brain of them to see the related with vision is actually bigger as well. So you can see that they have very big brain cases. The skull of them is very big. The eyes as well is very big. So they can go at night, they can see well at night, but they can also has adapted then to feed during the day as well, which means species go out sometimes. It's incredible. I haven't, until I went there, I haven't seen bats flying during the day. I was like, wow, that's a giant fly on the sky. I highly recommend it. It's an incredible experience to see these giants like flying just around the island and just moving around. Is very, I don't know if it's because I'm a bat biologist for most of my information, but I find it very incredible experience.
Oh, it is. It's fascinating. There's actually a few quick references I want to highlight to people that are tuning in that are super neat. One, if you're interested in echolocation, we just did a program yesterday with the Toronto Zoo on bat echolocation, which was super cool. So I've linked that to Stacy and her family already. One of the BBC series, I think it's their Africa series, has an episode where they have like 2 million fruit bats in the Congo that all take off at once, and it's one of the coolest things in the world. And then Texas, and I'm pretty sure it's Austin if I'm not mistaken. So Austin, Texas is a big bridge where every night like 200,000 bats come out from under the bridge. So if you ever get a chance to go down to Texas, get a steak too, because that's awesome. But also check out the bats, super cool. Hernani, this is great. I'm so excited. Okay, a few more questions. I'm going to go back to Stacy and Owen, and then I'll take the two from the students in Miss Gualtieri's class that just let me know. So Stacy, come on up, and you should be demuted. Oh, I just muted you. I did it the wrong way. There you go. You're perfect. Good to go.
Can the Mariana fruit bats be infected by white nose disease?
Yeah, good question.
That's a very good question. I don't know the answer actually. We believe that actually the white nose syndrome, I think as far as I know, because the research has been updating a lot of time. What we know about the white nose syndrome, because it's a very recent disease, is still changing across time. So every time it's changing a little bit what we know about what it actually can do. I believe that doesn't it can't affect very much because white nose syndrome is more related usually with more cold places. And we haven't detected so far in the world still, but because the white nose syndrome, as far as I know, might not actually have started in United States and North America. It was actually brought there, as far as I know. I think there might be a potential for it to go to different species and to spread around the world. But I would bet that is not able to affect the Mariana fruit bats. But actually, I can't tell for sure if it can or can't, to be entirely honest, because of the potential of the disease and also because we don't know sometimes all the aspects of the disease and how it works and the potential that it has to spread into other places.
Yeah. No, and that's perfect. Like I love when we can play Stump the Scientist, and it's you know, this is why research is so important. There's so much work being done all around the world by you and by other amazing researchers across the globe, try to understand this and you know, assess the threats facing bats and see how we can help conserve them, because it's so important. Awesome. Great question, guys. All right, I'm going to go to the 2 students in Miss Gualtieri's class. I just linked in the chat bar to everyone the BBC link to the world's largest gathering of fruit bats. So check that out when you're done. It is super cool. But stay around. Don't watch it right now. Watch it when we're done with Hernani. Let me go to Lennon. If you have a question for us, just demute your mic and come on up. Perfect. Good to go.
Do the flying bats act like bats? I mean, flying foxes act like bats?
It's a very good question. So one of the things that I found weird is when I went to study them is because they have a very interesting noise. When you go and study bats in Brazil or in some places, they have some squeaks like not like this, but they make very. I was not very good in making this noise.
Great, no, it's fine. It's all good.
But the Mariana fruit bats has a very guttural noise. You know, this noise that comes from like horror movies. Like I don't want to picture it. It's not a bad creature. It's not dangerous to us, but it makes a noise like. I was like, oh my God, where is this noise coming from?
Get back on the plane, just fly back home.
But it's different from the other bats because it flies during the day. They don't echolocate. So most of they fly mostly based on the vision and not by the echolocation that they have. They have this behavior of adjusting or kind of spitting out the fruits that they're eating. It is not very typical for frugivorous bats as well. They fly very large distance that we haven't, as far as I know, documented for other types of bats, such large migrations as well. And this makes them very, very particular in terms of how they are in comparison to other bat species from the United States, from Canada, from Brazil as well, and even from Europe as well. So most of the other bat species, they're usually much smaller. They go at night. They don't cover such high distance, or at least most of the species that we know. And they don't have so big eyes as well. They have like smaller eyes. So in this sense, they're very. I can show you just for you to have a comparison. Like one of the bat species that we have here in Brazil, that actually I'm studying at the moment, just for you to have an idea about. How it looks like. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah, so you can see my finger here. So this is actually one much smaller species, also endemic from the savannas of Brazil. So only happens in the savannas of Brazil. It's threatened as well. It's a nectarivorous bat, but you can see that's much smaller. Is much more fragile as well. It can die much more easily than the Mariana fruit bats are very big bats. In comparison to these ones, they're very robust. They can survive. You can, even if you squeeze them a little bit more, not very much, but a little bit more, they wouldn't feel it so much. Like they wouldn't. But yeah, don't squeeze it too much. But be gentle. But they're very strong animals, and these ones are very fragile. They're much smaller. They feed mainly on nectar. So if you don't feed them, if they don't feed for long periods of time, they can die very easily. So in this sense, the Mariana fruit bats are very, like the flying foxes, they're very particular in comparison to the other types of bats. Very good question.
Yeah, fantastic, guys. Well, unfortunately, we are getting time for about one more question before we wrap up. I told you it's the fastest 40 minutes of your life. So let me head to Albert. Albert, if you have a question for us still, let's just demute your mic and come on up and go for it. Let's see. Albert, you're good to go whenever you demute your mic, man. No, you're not demuted yet. You're still muted. You gotta just press. There you go. There you go.
Do the fox, what was it called? Do the bats attack people? Do the bats attack?
Yeah, perfect question. That was the best background stuff happening I've ever seen in this program. That was awesome. Albert, way to go, man. You fend off those siblings. So do the bats ever attack people, Hernani?
That's a very good question. So we have this belief that bats, they go hunting people at night. We should be scared because Batman's a bad guy, he's very tough, and all because of the legends of Dracula and all these things. But actually, bats are very gentle creatures. And if you think about you, like, would you attack something that's much bigger than you are? Like, most of the things that are very small, or they're specialized for eating, for attacking these things, they're bigger than them, or otherwise they'll just leave it alone. Most of the animals, they just want to be lived in peace. They don't want to be bothered. And this is true for most of the bat species. We have now 1,421 species of bats. And from all these types of bats, we have only 3 species that actually feed on blood, on mammal blood. And from these 3 species, only one actually can, or mostly can feed on the blood of humans. And this is the only one that actually can potentially sometimes cause some damage or can attack us. But this is also not very common because they're hidden in the forest. And if we don't disturb the forest, they're going to be left there and they're not going to come into contact with us. So basically, any case of the bat attacking a human is either because it's trying to protect itself, and they usually try to protect themselves by biting. It's one of the only defense that they have. Or in this case of the vampire bats, there are some cases of attacking humans, but usually they happen only when the forest is cut, and then we invade the space that they have, and they're left with no food because the animals are lost, the mammals that they feed, they die, and then they start to attack humans because we are invading their space, but not because they're bad creatures or because they want to attack us, because they want to be revenge against the environment that was lost or anything like that. Just because they have no food, they cannot survive long without food, and they need to eat something. And they say, oh, we have a human there, but I don't have my mammals anymore, so let's go for it. But it's not because they're actually like bad creatures or bad in this sense. Even the species, they can actually be beneficial for the environment because they transmit diseases for the mammals that are in this forest. And these diseases, they help to control these populations of animals. Because otherwise, some diseases, we usually try to think about diseases always as a bad thing, but in nature, they help to regulate the population of some species, some mammals and other species as well. So if you don't have diseases in nature, many species, they will just grow until they reach very high numbers, and they can potentially even disturb the whole ecosystem. So sometimes diseases, they also have a role in terms of controlling the growth of some species or populations as well. And even the disease that bats can transmit, they have a role in the environment in terms of controlling these populations to not spread too much. The problem is when we cut the forest and we get in touch with them, or we disturb the environment, and this disease, they get out of control. But if we protect the environment and the bats as well, the chance of any of the diseases come into contact with us, and we have something like this, as this pandemic is happening again, is very, very low.
Hernani, that is the best possible message I can think to wrap up on. I mean, this is something that we cover in so many of our conservation programs, whether it's bats or any other animal. If you respect animals, if you respect their space, you're unlikely to ever be in a situation where the animal is likely to harm you. Just like, as a person in your class, you don't want to go around biting people either. Same idea. And with conservation, one of the biggest things is habitat protection. If we keep these habitats intact, if we don't encroach upon them, you're unlikely to have negative interactions with animals. So fantastic message. As I said, it's always so much fun having you in. This is such a great time, Hernani. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It was great to have you here as well, all the questions as well.
Yeah, great questions today, everyone. And again, I passed along some resources in chat bar so far. Here, you can check out the BBC Bat video and the YouTube link as well. Let me know if you need that after the fact. And Bat Conservation International. So this is just a great organization. Everyone can look up how to build a bat box, use bat detectors, make some of those, see what's going on in your community. Bat Conservation International, great group. Do check them out. Hernani, what we do at the end of every session, as you know, because you've done this rodeo before, I'm going to demute everyone's microphone, or have all our groups demute their microphones. And so boys and girls, families at home, if you guys could all join me in saying a huge thank you to Hernani for joining us all the way in Brazil today. You should slowly but surely be demuted, and go for it. Thank you so much, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much, everyone. Awesome,
you.
guys. We really appreciate y'all tuning in. Again, it's so much fun to be able to bring people all the way up. Hey, we appreciate people. Everyone's excited. So yeah, so appreciate you guys all coming in. Check out more resources, ask more questions. Hernani, have a wonderful rest of your day, man, and good luck with all the amazing work you're always up to.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, we'll see you later.